Good morning, folks. Very warm welcome. My name's Paul. I'm the founder and CEO of Trickle, and I've got the pleasure of hosting today's second in our Be the Change webinar series. Today's topic is how not to alienate Gen Z. So today we're joined by Lucy Kemp, who I had the pleasure of speaking alongside at a recent NHS event. Lucy has conducted research involving over 2,000 Gen Z workers and has many insights to share with us today to help us reflect and to make improvements in our own workplaces. So Lucy's going to lead the first half of this session, and then we're going to jump on to a Q&A in the second half. Thanks to all of you that have already submitted your questions, and please use the chat function within Teams if you've got any questions that you want to submit as the session unfolds. So let's get moving. Lucy, over to you.
Thank you very much, and hello everyone. I'm just going to share my screen, something that we say all the time in probably every meeting. Okay, so I don't want to introduce myself quickly. I run a consultancy called Kemp & Co, and what we do is we work with companies either going through changes, and that could be, redundancies, new leadership teams, new strategies, new products, things like that. If they're coming up to change, such as an IPO, a merger and acquisition, being acquired, or an event or an exit of any kind, or there's something wrong. You're looking at your ENPS score if you're doing pulse surveys, and the scores keep dipping. People are leaving before 6 months. You can't hire. You look on your Glassdoor, it's not going well. That's when we come in. And what we do is it's something called an EX Audit. EX stands for employee experience. And we look at every stage of your employee's employee experience, and we work out what's going really well, what we're going to wrap our arms around, what we're going to keep, what we're going to enhance, and what isn't going so well. And then we work with your people to fix the bits that aren't going so well. So it's a bottom-up approach. And one thing that has come up in every single audit I've done, I'd say in the past 2.5 years, is Gen Z. Managers kept saying to me, we have Gen Z, we have this new generation on our team. They're useless, they're awful, they're rubbish, they're so lazy, they're so entitled, I can't work with them. Gen Zs are saying, it's horrible here, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm not given enough supervision, I feel like I'm failing all the time. It's horrible. Both sides are not having a great time. The Gen Zs are not engaged. They are not part of high-performing, productive teams. The managers are frustrated. They're not creating high-performing, productive teams. And we all know to create profits, to have a very strong culture company-wide, you need strong, high-performing, productive teams. So after I'd heard this a couple of times, I decided to go out and do some research. I'm all about data. So I wanted to give my clients and the companies I work with, the partners I work with, the best form of information. So I started looking about what do Gen Z really want from their employee experience? How can we help them? And this is what I found. It's this sort of stuff. It's outdated. It's things like give them a nice laptop. Or great, okay, give us all a nice laptop. Or they want diversity inclusion. But what do they want? It's very high level, generic rubbish. A lot of it also is pre-pandemic. And the world has changed, especially for Gen Z. That pandemic era, they stepped into work during that, and it has shaped them in a way that none of us thought was going to be possible. And also a lot of it's American, and we have a very different culture here. I work with a lot of companies in the UK and in Europe, and the cultures there are so dramatically different to the US that this sort of research doesn't make a difference. So I decided to do my own. And in the past year and a half, the research paper officially came out earlier this year, but I've carried on researching. I'm doing a lot of work with Gen Zs at the moment. And I've spoken now to over 3,000 Gen Zs via surveys, via focus group, via one-to-ones. But I've also now spoken to over 100 managers and leadership teams on what they want, because I wanted the research to not only give an insight onto what Gen Zs want, but also how do we equip managers to deal with that? How do we make sure leaders are making the right decisions? So what did that research tell me? This is what they want. And this is not in hierarchical order of importance. So when I was speaking to leaders at the start, I said, what do you think Gen Zs want? And they said to me, purpose, it's social responsibility. That's all they want. That is all they want. And some of them said to me, we actually pay our Gen Zs less. because we have a purpose. Their purpose was the fact they give to charity. It wasn't, they're not saving lives, but they were like, we have that, so we pay our Gen Zs less, we would pay other generations coming in. And to be honest, when I looked at, before I did the research properly, I also thought purpose would be number one. Totally, without a doubt, it's definitely purpose, because that's what we're told. That's what other research led us to believe. But actually, number one was money. And really, that's the same for all of us. Yes, Gen Zs may want purpose, they want other things, but really, they want to be paid fairly for what they are doing. Money is still king. So when you're looking at attracting Gen Zs, retaining Gen Zs, the compensation element is still really, really key. So what's next? A safe and healthy work environment. And I'm going to come on to this later, the safe, especially around safe spaces, because it's something I talk about a lot and I'm hearing about a lot. But by this, they obviously mean a safe work environment. If you're going into an office, we want to be in a safe office. What they really mean is psychological safety. This is a generation who uses their voices. They are very free and easy what they talk about, and they want that to carry on into a workplace. So they will talk to you about a lot of things that probably as managers, we wouldn't have discussed before. When we were being managed by someone, we probably definitely wouldn't have discussed before, but they want a safe space to do it in. And they want managers to create that safe space. And that, if you haven't done it before, is really, really, really tricky. And they want learning and development opportunities and work-life balance. They want to learn on the job. They want to come into a job and they want to learn while they're there. And they want to develop and they want to do it in a way that works for them. We came into organizations that I did 20 odd years ago, and working ridiculous hours was the norm. If you weren't doing it, you were frowned upon. And we still carry that forward. I still carry that forward. I'm guilty of it. They don't. They expect a 9 to 5. They are happy to work late if a project needs it, but that shouldn't be the norm. And that's when sometimes managers can be looking at them and not really understanding exactly why they are not going above and beyond. Because for us, of course, what you live and breathe work, not so much for the Gen Zs. So really, when you think about it, they want to be paid fairly. I'll put my teeth back in. They want a safe space to work in, both mentally and physically. They want to learn and develop on the job, and they want work-life balance. Now, I'm 43. That's what I want. That is exactly what I want. When I'm talking to managers and explaining what Gen Zs want, that's what the managers want as well. That's what leadership teams want. That's what everyone expects from their employee experience. And to be honest with you, from an EX perspective in general, these are foundation level EX. So are Gen Zs entitled? No. Are they expecting too much? No. They are expecting exactly the same as what we expect, what we want. But they're not afraid to say it. And again, this is where that entitlement element comes in. Because would we have said this back then? No, we wouldn't have. We were too afraid. I've had experiences when someone said to me, a manager said to me, Lucy, I try and give my Gen Zs feedback and they tell me they don't accept it or they push back and it's awful. I used to go and cry in the toilets when I got feedback. And I used to go and cry in the toilets when I got feedback. I imagine quite a few of us, or at least we feel really bad about it. But what we should have done is been brave enough to say, I'm not sure I really agree with that feedback. Let me tell you why. And this is what they're doing. They are just braver than us. But we, as managers and leadership teams, don't quite know how to deal with it. So like I said, this is a snapshot of the really important things. And the white paper I've developed on this, which is completely free, it's out in the open, gives you all the actions you need to address all of the things that Gen Zs want from an attraction point of view and from a retention point of view. But let's get on to the thing we spoke about at the beginning, purpose. And the reason I really want to get into this is because it's something, like I said, that every conversation I had around Gen Zs before the research came out is this is it. Even brands, I've spoken to a lot of brands actually who are reformulating their marketing teams to have Gen Z experts on there. And they keep saying if a brand has a purpose, that's all you need. It can be, we can hike up the price as long as it has a purpose. So is it really that important? Yes, it is in some cases, but not as much as you think. I spoke to the Gen Zs and I said, if a brand had an amazing purpose and gave you less money versus a brand with a, it had some form of purpose, but more money, what would you take? Money won every single time. When I spoke about those other four things, so money, safe space, learning and development, work-life balance, if they were all really, really good, but it didn't have a purpose, we should take the job. Yes, they would. What was interesting though, and this is also the case with diversity and inclusion and political leanings when it comes to companies, they expect purpose to be a norm. They don't like companies who shout about it. And again, this is with DEI. Someone said to me, if a company is talking all the time on LinkedIn or in in internal newsletters, things like that, about Pride Week, to me, I'm going to think you have a problem with your LGBTQ plus community, because why would you shout about it? Purpose, diversity and inclusion, political leanings are intrinsic. You don't need to talk about it anymore. It just needs to be there. But that means it needs to be much less performative and more strategic. So I've had companies, I'll give you an example, who will reach out to me if more from an employer branding point of view, and it is towards attracting Gen Zs. And I had one recently said, I want you to make it look like we like gays. Obviously, Pride's coming up. And I said, no, I will not be working with you on that. But what I will come in and do is work out your DEI strategy so you can make sure you have tangible actions and goals. And that's what you deliver to your company, as opposed to we're making it look like we like gays, but really we're doing nothing. Pride, we're going to put some, pride flags out, maybe some cupcakes, maybe get a drag queen in to do some bingo. But the rest of the year, we're just going to ignore it. Performative is out, strategic is in. But what are the things that are really, really, really going to make a difference when it comes to what you can do right now? It's this, and weirdly, they're all interlinked. And these are the things that I am talking about the most at the moment. Number one is data. Gen Zs, and I'll take a step back. Whatever the incoming generation wants or expects, the next generation, in this case, millennials, wants in 2 years or expects in 2 years. After that, it only takes 1 year for the next generation, in this case, Gen X, to want that. So by getting your employee experience right for your Gen Zs, you're actually getting it right for everyone. You're future-proofing your business. What Gen Zs want is a personalized employee experience. And again, we all weirdly expect that because outside of work, everything is personalized. I will, on Spotify, for example, they'll be like, Lucy, we've created a personalized playlist that will suit you. They're usually spot on. It's fantastic. I love it. But I've come to expect that. I will get an email. You left this in your basket in this shop. We think you'd like X, Y, and Z. Again, great. Love that. It's a personalized experience for me. It makes me feel special. Gen Zs want this from their employee experience, and therefore other generations will want that within 3 years. But how do we understand what they want? Data. Data is key and crucial, especially if you are part of a people or HR team. Data gives you that foundational knowledge. I mean, years ago, people would say, when I've worked with HR teams and people teams, they would say, Lucy, we just want a seat at the table. Data has given you that seat at the table because you can prove now what people want. But the problem I'm having is that the data isn't right. Companies with the best will in the world are creating employee experiences and making really key recommendations on initiatives such as benefits and pensions and policies for maternity and paternity, reproductive health policies based on the data that isn't true. But how do we make sure we're getting the right data? And they get the data in the right way, don't get me wrong. They're using pulse surveys, they're using feedback in questions in town halls and all hands and things like that. But how are we making sure we're getting the right data? And it comes on to safe spaces. Have you created a safe space for people to say what they want and for you to get that right data? And the answer is probably not. safe spaces and the word safe space has become more and more and more popular. Like when it comes to like Google searches, it exponentially has grown. Things like safe space and psychological safety, things like that. It is amazing. And companies are doing a lot. But I've noticed a real trend recently, a worrying trend, that where companies have said to me, we've created a safe space, it's fantastic. Our people feel completely comfortable in saying whatever they want to us. So we've taken away the anonymity. And this is the worst thing you can do. I'll be really honest with you, because even if you think you have created a safe space, your space won't be safe for everyone. And by that, I mean, if you are neurodiverse, if you are an introvert, if you are a minority, if you are a woman, it is really, really tricky or trickier to raise your hand and say something, because we have different lived experiences and we get looked at differently. My lived experience is being a woman. So do I find it hard to put my hand up sometimes and when I've been in a company in a past life? I do, because we are seen as, oh, you're always complaining about something, or you're just nagging. Women nag, and this is another thing. So I'd rather sit in my hands and be like, oh, don't think about it, think about it. And that means I've lost trust in the leadership because I haven't been able to say anything. My safe space is gone. Whereas once I might have been a promoter of a company, I'm now a detractor. But how can we create amazing safe spaces? That is where technology comes in. Now, your pulse surveys are doing a great job. Don't get me wrong. If you have anonymity in there, they're doing an amazing job. But what people really, really, really want from tech is for you to get the data. Then what? They want you to give you a safe space, get the data, but then see what you're doing with that data. The data usually goes into a void. Lots of companies will say things like, we will do a great, you said we did campaign. They don't. And the reason they don't do it is because they're too busy firefighting. If you've got a list of all the things that your people want and need, and some of them can be quite urgent and crucial, you haven't got time to then communicate it out. And this is one of the things I work on with companies the most, is how are you communicating out? The employee experience has changed. Because so many people keep saying to me, I haven't got a way to give feedback, or there's no learning and development. There is, but the people teams are so busy doing all this stuff, they haven't had time to tell the company about it. And you get this mismatch because the people team are like, we're doing all this stuff, no one cares. And the employees are like, we're giving all this feedback, no one cares. That communications bridge is crucial. Back to the original point. We've got the data, but we don't know what you're doing with it. Now, I'm going to be very, very transparent here. I do not work for Trickle. I do not have shares in Trickle. But Trickle is the platform I recommend to every single person that I do an EX audit for. Because not only does it give you a safe space to put your idea forward with your name against it, so you can work on it, it gives you a safe space to do it anonymously as well. So you have both options there, amazing. But it also lets you see what's happening with it. So it's almost like that communications bridge, although I would always recommend putting that in, internal comms is crucial for this. Trickle almost does that for you. So when it comes to technology, you need to make sure you have the right tech in the right way, and you're using it in the right way as well. Now on to training. Gen Zs are in a very tricky position because they came into the workforce remotely and they haven't learned soft skills. And this, again, is something I do a lot of. I do soft skills training for Gen Zs. I do manager training. I have a whole training suite because it's just needed. Because I've worked with Gen Zs who don't know how to manage stakeholders, don't know how to work with managers, don't know how to receive feedback. They feel that feedback is always against them and they are devastated by it. They don't know how to structure an email. They don't know how to be proactive. And that's not their fault. They've been brought up that way slightly, but also they entered into a weird world where you didn't learn from osmosis. We all sat next to each other. We came into the workforce and we learned from people. We could tap people on the shoulder. It just worked. That world has gone, but companies haven't put anything else in place. So again, what are we doing? Are we training people when they come in and be like, you go through this training course before you even start your role to make sure you are, fit for the workplace? Again, are you training your managers? It's very good training Gen Zs and blaming them for everything, but are we equipping our managers? When it comes to managers, they become managers because they do a great job. And then we're like, you did a great job. Here's a team of 10. carry on being great at your job, but also manage these people. But we're not going to tell you how to do it or give you any support for that. Support your managers. And that comes with things like giving feedback, having difficult conversations, managing multi-generational teams. Things also like this is how you almost like communicate internal comms for managers as well. But then are you giving your managers a safe space? This is things I'm working on with companies all the time. We just don't think about manager training that much, but we should. And then a slight future focus when it comes to training. AI is incredible, don't get me wrong, big fan. One of the things a lot of companies are doing now with it is removing the entry-level jobs. They're taking all those admin-based jobs away. It saves them money. I get it. Profits are going to go up. However, what does that mean for the incoming generations? Those entry-level jobs is where we learned, is where we failed, is where we made mistakes. If that isn't there anymore, their first job is a skilled job. So how are they getting, again, workforce ready without actually ever being able to, not learning remotely, which is what they're doing now, they won't ever have that opportunity. So are we running workshops again before people join us? If we're expecting them to be really work ready, what are you doing? Because otherwise, if we're not doing this, you're going to have to really make sure that your older workforce, your Gen X's, your boomers even, are ready to stay in their place for a long time, because that future generation won't be ready because those entry-level jobs have just gone. So this is what you need to be focused on right now. But a question I always get asked is, what should we be really worried about when it comes to Gen Z? So positive, ending on such a positive note. And it's this. This is what it is. When I was doing the research, what I found is there was a huge gap between what male Gen Zs want and female Gen Zs want. And I couldn't stop thinking about it, probably because, again, lived experience as a woman. So I really deep dived into why there was such a difference. And I wanted to find out exactly what women wanted. And what I found out is that women, I'll take a step back. The question I found the most disparity in was, what do you want from your manager? Because again, this white paper was to give managers and leadership teams an idea on how to manage and lead Gen Zs. And the men were like, oh, I want someone who's really going to push me, push me up the career ladder, develop me, get me to the next stage. Great, give them. That's what I want. When it came to the women, they want an empathetic, caring boss. And I was like, this is really strange. So I spoke to a lot more women. I ended up speaking to over 1,800 women so far. And what they told me is that I need an empathetic boss because I am going to have to be a carer. And we think about caring, we think about young children having babies. It's not just that. We are in a sandwich generation now where people are having kids later, which means they have to look after elderly parents. And they said, if I want to be a carer, I need an empathetic boss because I'm going to have to go to appointments and I'm going to have time off. And I just want someone who's going to look after me. And I said, so you're giving up your career to be a carer? And they said, yes, because companies don't let you do both. They don't let you do both. And they said, and look, there's no one doing it. There's no women in higher up positions. So obviously they can't do it. So all these women have left. So I'm just not going to do it. This leaves you with the people who choose carer, choose to have children. It's leaving you with really unengaged employees. They feel the companies let them down. On the other hand, which is even more scary, a lot more of the Gen Z women said, we're going to choose career because it's too hard to have a baby, especially in these days, or we're going to have a baby a lot later. We're going to really push it. Right now, it's all about career because you can't do both. There's no women in leadership positions doing it both. I have to choose my career. From a society point of view, this is even worse. For us to carry on as we are, happily, birth rate has to be 2.1. It's currently 1.3 and it's declining still. And you may think, Lucy, does that really matter? Oh, and something I never thought I'd be worried about at this age, a declining birth rate, but I really am. Number one, economically, it changes things. They're going to be less consumers. These consumers are going to want different things. There's lots of, for example, the childcare market is going to change. The childcare clothing, toys, all that kind of thing is going to change. The housing market is going to change. The pool of talent companies have is going to change. Instead of looking for the best, you're just going to have to work for what's there. because there aren't going to be enough people there. There's going to be less people paying into a pension. Like I said, I'm 43. There will not be a pension when I'm pensionable age. We'll need more infrastructure, so to look after the elderly. We're going to have to make our people work longer. We're going to have to support an elderly workforce because we haven't got the young generation coming in. The reason I'm telling you all this is because companies can make a difference when it comes to this. There is so much we could be doing to support women so that you can have both a career and be a carer. It shouldn't be a choice. It can be, you can have both, because it's not only good for companies, because you get these really amazing, engaged, loyal, productive, high-performing teams with women in. And actually, the more women you have, the higher your profits. But it's good for society. It's good for everyone. It's good for the future in general. Now, shameless plug, my next white paper is all around that, and it's out in 2 weeks. But I've asked the people at Trickle to share it with you early, just because this is something I'm so passionate about and something that I really think companies need to start thinking about now, because really it is already too late. So that's it from the presentation point of view. I am now going to stop sharing my screen so we can go on to the questions.
Thank you so much, Lucy. I always love hearing your insights on Gen Z. And what I love as well is that you talked about kind of foundational level employee experience, right? And my experience is that that's a lot of the time where organizations should be focused on, right? Where leaders should be focusing on that foundational stuff, which is great. Right now, I've got a sheet in front of me with so many things scribbled on it from your talk, right? So, and we've already got questions that have been submitted, but I'm going to go back to my squiggles, and I'm going to start, first of all, with psychological safety, which is a topic that's very close to my heart. A confession, when I started Trickle about 5 years ago, I actually hadn't heard the term psychological safety, albeit it's very fundamental to what we do. I'll go back to anonymity, right, and the importance, in my view, that played in creating a psychologically safe environment. And we've talked about fear, okay? Why do you think there's a lot of fear, given that there's a lot of leaders in the audience today? What do you think the fear is around anonymity and having that available as an option?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm working with 3 different clients at the moment who are all really fearful of anonymity. And they keep saying to me they don't want to be trolled. They think that if you have anonymity in there, it's going to bring out people's worst behaviors. And that isn't an anonymity issue, that's a cultural issue. Often there will be an underlying culture, and people always say culture is how you feel on a Sunday, or culture is, the best things about a company. It's not. Culture is the worst behavior that will be tolerated. So a company I'm working with right now has a bullying culture. It comes down from the top. The fish always rots from the head. That is their culture. The leadership lets that happen. That's their culture. They will not go anonymous because they keep saying, we're going to get trolled. No, you're getting trolled because you have a bullying culture. You're not getting trolled because all of a sudden you're letting anonymous questions going in. So if you're afraid of anonymity, it's because you have a problem with your culture. So that's what you've got to fix. Not going anonymous, not going anonymous isn't going to fix anything. It's just going to give you that wrong data. By being brave enough to have anonymous questions on there or have an anonymous feedback mechanism, you are going to get the right data. Yes, obviously, we are all going to get some form of dodgy questions. And there are ways you can mitigate that. And I know I'm working with clients on, but that's the only way you're going to get that really, really good, rich data that's going to allow you to have really amazing employee experiences. If you don't have that, there's no level playing field. And so you're going to have the loudest voices giving you the data. And so you're only creating an amazing company for the loudest voices, which isn't what it's all about.
Yeah, 100%. I'm going to tell you a little story about my first experience of anonymity. So it was like 25 years ago now. I just graduated and I was in my first job. And we worked in a startup. There was like, I don't know, 30 of us. I think I was like the 4th employee. And we were working from this like massive house where the founders like were renting. And it didn't have like office equipment. It was like, hey, you're all sitting on benches at the dining room chairs. And obviously there wasn't laptops in those days. And what happened is that over time, we started getting all these little niggles like, hey, this isn't a comfy seat. And, lots of different things, right? People were arriving. We kind of started working a certain way. And then you add more people and that way of work just becomes the way that you work, right? and it was kind of starting to creak. As I say, not a massive business, like 25, 30 people. But what happened is that people were really frustrated, right? But nobody was talking about it. We were talking about it
Exactly.
at lunchtime. We were talking about it in the garden when we're sitting having our sandwiches. So I was about to leave, right? Because I was just so frustrated. This was after about a couple of years. And I was really quiet at school and at university, right? My report card said quiet works well. So I was one of these introverts. I've maybe changed a little bit now. But what I thought was, this is pretty silly, right? There's all these people that have got all these frustrations, but we're not kind of talking about them in front of the leadership or the founders of the
Hmm.
organization. So what I did is I kind of through speaking to people at lunchtime, right? I started writing a list actually on a bit of paper, right, of the things that were biting people on the backside. And then I put a score against it, right? If it was 7 people, it had a score of 7, right? And then I sorted it into order, put it into a Word document, and on a floppy disk, which I remember was called
Oh, I
company
remember
issues dot
those.
doc. I left it on the MD's desk. Right now, I wasn't anonymous, right, because I was leaving anyway. I felt like I had nothing to lose. Left it on the founder's desk, and the next day I got a call. Hey, Paul, can you come out for lunch with me and a couple of directors? Long story short, I was really nervous about going out for that lunch, right? But it was transformational for that business because they said, "Hey, we totally didn't appreciate that there was all these challenges. There was like 25 things in this list, right?" And they asked me to then help engage and kind of work on tackling those. But that business then went on to be really, really strong. And the people that were frustrated ended up being real champions for that organization, right? And that was a really good example of a leadership style that was kind of hidden before that, you know? It was like, hey, we want to listen, but we don't really know how to do it.
Yeah, and it's hard. I'm working with it's an academy at the moment. And when I came in, they said, we know all the problems, Lucy. We have all the problems, but we just want you to go in. And it was almost like a tick box exercise. We just want you to go in and do this whole anonymous thing so that, so it looks like we've done a due diligence, sorry, when it comes to this. And I knew that I'd be doing the real work. So I was like, yeah, that's fine. And I went in, I did it. And the problems that actually came out, people were actually concerned about, were completely different from the leadership team. So had thought of. So they were going to be putting in initiatives, recommendations based on what they thought, which would have taken the academy in the wrong direction. Whereas I was able, because being an external person helps because I don't have relationships with anyone, so I can be really, really neutral. But because of the anonymity piece, and we allowed that to happen, I was able to give them the real set of problems and be like, no, but this is actually what you need to work on. Here are the recommendations that your people have put forward. So it makes a massive difference. Like you said, it can be transformative when it comes to a company's strategy, the journey they're on, and their future as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool, right. I've got a question in the chat here. Thank you so much. Great insights. What initiatives can workplaces implement to specifically retain and support female Gen Z employees, ensuring they feel valued and have equal opportunities for growth?
Great question. And there are lots of this on the new white paper. Two things, really, it is actually it's just one thing. It's listening to your female employees. Number one, because I could say, and in the white paper, I do say, here are the things you need to consider. But really, it's finding out what your female employees want. So when you're getting this data, make sure you can segment it. And then it's doing like the focus groups, doing the things like that. I've done a hackathon for female Gen Zs, which has been amazing, where we just worked on problems. That's the dream. That's your starter. But then really getting down to it, it is family friendly policies, obviously, but it's like future family friendly policies. And it's not just things like you can have paternity and maternity leave. It's female reproductive policies. Gen Zs are a lot more open about everything and they talk a lot more openly about everything and they want that. So it's things like company called Hey Flow is incredible when it comes to this. And they do a lot of training around managers. Going on to that is training your managers properly to deal with women Gen Z. I said to deal with women Gen Zs in. Deal with them. Don't deal with them. To help them thrive, to develop them. It's making sure your managers are equipped to that because we tend to have one management style, but we need to learn how to flex it as well. And lastly, and this is another shameless plug for a future people, the research I'm right in the middle of now, it's retaining your more senior women talent. Having that almost showcase of what you can do and having mentors is incredible. It makes such a difference, but it just doesn't happen. And what's strange is I remember when I was coming into the workplace and I thought, there's no women. And that was back then. That just happened. But I found there's a pandemic of women 38 to 50, people my age, leaving work. And that's what I'm finding out now. How do we retain that? So I am in the middle of speaking to, again, over 2,000 women my age to work out how are we keeping you? Because if we keep you, we will retain those Gen Zs. So there's a real link there, which I think is crucial for companies start to look at.
Cool. So retention, engagement is a big part of retention, right? And
yeah,
doing my own reading about kind of Gen Z, and you kind of see it through your kids and their friends and things like that, is not attention span, right? But the way that they consume information, right? It's
very different.
Short, sharp bursts, right? It's like, hey, I'm watching this for 3 seconds. Oh, it didn't engage me. I'm on to the next thing. So engagement in the workplace is crucial, obviously, to retain people, right? You need them engaged, you need them aligned with a purpose. What would you say are the top factors that can keep Gen Z employees engaged at work?
So there are two things. It's tech and transparency. And from a tech point of view, you need to replicate what we are using in our general life. For Gen Z's, tech is not an entitlement or an expectation, it's a norm. And I always use this example, and I've used it with you, Paul, is that my daughter, Lyra, wakes up in the morning and she'll be like, Alexa, play me Beyonce. And to her, norm, absolute norm, doesn't think anything of it. Whereas I'm still like, oh, I can't believe we have this. This is incredible. That is exactly what we're talking about. Gen Zs can, on their phone, buy a house, they can sell a house. They can find a partner for life. They can do their shopping. They can buy a car. They can do their banking. They can sign documents. And yet they come into work and we're like, if you want to hear about what we're doing in the company, you have to join us physically. So you have to come into work for that. And if you don't come into work for that, we're not going to tell you about it. Or you're onboarding. You need to print off these documents. And I'm working with the client that still makes people do this. Print off this document, sign it, find a place to scan it in. You can't have a photo of it. We need an actual scan of it and then send it to us. You might be asking to use a fax machine. You need to use tech to replicate it every day so that it's easy for them. So that's your tech. Transparency, it's back to that communications bridge. They want to know, they expect transparency overall. And so they want to know what's going on in the company, but they want to know more so what's in it for them. So whenever I'm working with companies, and I work with companies that are going through a lot of change, so I'm like, here's the change, but here's what's in it for you. We are now in an individualistic society where we think more about ourselves than we did 30 years ago. Before, it was like a collective society. Now we're individualistic. So to keep me engaged, I want to know what I'm going to get out of it and what I can expect. So it's that kind of thing. It's making sure you are using those messages, but using them through tech as well. That's how you're going to keep everyone really engaged.
Perfect. I think another part of that as well, not just for Gen Z, but kind of not living with the status quo, right? So you talk about expectations, right? People, your Alexa example, right? And then people come into the workplace and it's like, yeah, print out and sign it. And, in the workplaces that we're all in, processes just evolve over time, right? It's like, hey, we started this 10 years ago and we're maybe still doing something similar now. And I always love the kind of gross, get rid of stupid stuff and that kind of, hey, we're not going to accept the status quo. And I think personally, that's something that's really important to show as leaders in an organization is that, yeah, the way we do things right now is maybe not the way we should be doing it tomorrow, and allowing people to speak up and, really feel that they're safe to contribute to those things. Some more questions coming in. Okay, so what can the career service improve on to support Gen Z to be work ready if the entry-level jobs are being excluded?
See, this again, I said I worry about things. I worry about the declining birth rate. I would worry about this. I was part of an AI panel last week, and everyone was really promoting AI. And I was the one being like, no, this isn't what we should be talking about. We should be talking about how is it going to impact our people. I foresee, and this is something I'm doing as well, I foresee there to be more training companies popping up that will specialize in this. Like I say, this is what I specialize in. This is what I will train people on. But there needs to be more. There needs to be more. So companies, if they are looking for someone for a skilled role, they have to make people go to, say, an academy of sorts, or a soft skills university, let's say. So they are trained up before you join, because it's that bit there that's going to stop the friction, where managers are expecting people to be work ready, but people, of course, they're not work ready because they're no entry level roles. So I think it's that kind of thing. It's making sure you have the right training. So it's whether you put that in-house and you have a specific future of work trainer. If you have an L&D department, that is something you could look at. They go through your training course, or whether you partner with external academies and be like, right, all of our people are always going to do this training before they join to make sure they are ready. But it is, I'll be honest with you, it's a real concern. And it's one, worryingly, that hardly any companies have thought about or are worried about or prepared for. But all of a sudden, there's going to be a switch, and you're going to, the employee experience for everyone, leaders, managers, employees, is going to really, really take a dip.
Thank you. And then last question, I think we've got time for on the side, is from Amanda from the Q&A. So I completely see the priorities of Gen Z in a healthcare workplace, junior doctor strikes, working behaviours. Are you having conversations that may help understand this in the NHS in addition to business? And then there's a note, increasing pool of creative young healthcare professionals help with that care gap you describe.
So, to be very honest, I haven't had conversations with the NHS on this, so I don't have that experience. So I might put it back to Paul, because I imagine you may have more experience on this one.
Yeah, so I guess what we have is experience of helping facilitate those conversations, right? So that's, I mean, as we talked about earlier, the kind of number one use case for Trickle, right, is giving people a space where they can talk about the things that are important. And then understanding people's priorities, be it Gen Z or otherwise, right? That's one of the things that Trickle does, is says, okay, here's the 5 things that you should be paying attention to or engaging upon right now. So we do, but we don't kind of get involved in the specifics. So maybe that's the topic for another day.
Maybe another topic, but really, no matter whether it's the NHS or whether it's anywhere, that whole employee experience piece, like finding out exactly what's going on. So often we will see a symptom, very, very appropriate. I'm using this given which way NHS. You'll see a symptom and you will treat that symptom and you will put a sticky plaster on it, as opposed to not doing that and taking the time to really look at the employee experience and find out exactly what that root cause is. And that's what you need to fix, as opposed to treating the symptoms. And that works for any company, large or small, established, scaling. That's what you need to do first. You need to find out exactly what's going on before we can then put a plan over the top of that to fix it.
Yeah, so you know you're doing the right things, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, brilliant. I'm going to have to draw a line under it now. Okay, that's us out of time.
I will.
And I could have carried on.
I know I could talk about this for hours. I will just say, if anyone ever has any questions or wants to know more or anything like that, find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat, answer any questions, any queries. As you can see, I love talking about this a lot.
Yeah, it's been a fantastic discussion, Lucy, so thank you so much. So thank you for sharing your wonderful insights and your wisdom with all of us today. And also a huge thanks to everyone in the audience for taking the time to join us and engage with us as well by sending in your questions. Really appreciate that. Hope it's been a valuable use of your time. A couple of things before we go. If you're interested in a 30-minute employee engagement health check, then there's a QR code on the screen in front of you. And one last thing is our next webinar is in August. So we're having a break in July just for the summer. So we're going to be joined by Nick Elston, who's an award-winning mental health and international speaker. And he's going to talk about the power of one, how individual actions can ignite organizational change. And it's all about discovering how even the smallest actions can create a ripple effect in your workplace. So we'd love it if you can join us for that. In the meantime, that's us done. Goodbye, and I hope you all have a good day and a good summer. Thank you.
Thanks all.